Hey, you. Welcome to the WithGen podcast. If we've never met before, my name is Genevieve, but most people just call me Jen. I'm an entrepreneur, community builder, and someone who's endlessly fascinated by how people build lives that actually feel like their own. And if you're new here, you're very welcome to the family. This podcast is for people who think a little deeper, who feel a little more, who have this quiet sense that life could be bigger, kinder, more meaningful than what they've been told. So if you somehow ended up here today, scrolling, searching, or maybe someone sent you this episode, I want you to know something. That's usually not an accident. It had to be like this. The fact that you're listening to conversations like this already tells me something about you. It tells me that somewhere inside of you, there is a part that believes life can be lived more consciously, more courageously, and maybe even a little differently than the default path. And if you enjoy conversations like this about building, growth, and designing a life that actually fits you, you're always welcome to stick around. This podcast and everything around it is really just a place where people who think like this can find each other. So, welcome. Today, I want to talk about something that almost nobody warns you about when you start building something meaningful, something I call the loneliness of vision. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. Have you ever had an idea, a dream, or even just a different way of looking at life? And the people around you looked at you like you were a little bit crazy, like you were being unrealistic, too ambitious, or maybe even a little arrogant. Maybe it wasn't even a business idea. Maybe it was wanting to travel alone when everyone said it was dangerous. Been there, done that, by the way. One of the best ways to discover the earth and yourself. Or choosing not to have kids when everyone assumed you would. Leaving a stable job, trying to find something uncertain and unusual. Going back to school at 40. Ending a relationship that looked perfect on paper but felt hollow on the inside. Starting therapy when your family doesn't believe in it. Creating art when people told you it's not a real career. If that has ever happened to you, then what you're about to hear today might explain a lot because the loneliness of vision is something almost every builder, every creator or dreamer goes through at some point. And yet, almost nobody talks about it. And later in this episode, I'll share 3 psychological tools that helped me survive that phase without giving up on what I was building. But first, I want to tell you a story. Because the first time I truly experienced the loneliness of vision was when I started my very first community. At the time, the group had around 100 members. And by the group, I mean the free Facebook group. Gotta start somewhere, right? Now, if you say that out loud, some people will think, oh, that's not that many. But try imagining 100 people in your living room. Suddenly, that number feels very different. To me, it already felt like something real, something alive, something that had potential. But someone close to me looked at the exact same situation and said something very different. They said, come on, this isn't going anywhere. You should stop and just get a normal job. They told me that nobody makes money from something like this. Nobody gets emotional support from something like this. And if I wanted it to work, I'd have to pour huge amounts of money into it first. And I remember that moment very clearly because what hurt wasn't just the criticism. It was the feeling of not being understood at all. It felt like we were looking at the same reality but seeing completely different worlds. I saw possibility, they saw nothing. And here's a real kicker. They weren't trying to be cruel, they were genuinely worried. They thought they were protecting me from failure, from disappointment, from wasting time on something that wouldn't work. But what they didn't understand was that I wasn't building this because I had proof it would work. I was building it because I couldn't not build it, right? Just like you're trying to do with your vision. Because something inside me knew that this mattered, even if I couldn't explain it yet, even if the numbers were small, even if it looked like nothing from the outside. And when you're in that space where your internal knowing is louder than external validation, that's when the loneliness really hits. And when that happens, something strange starts happening in your mind. You start doubting yourself. Not necessarily because your idea is bad, but because nobody around you can confirm that it makes sense. So you enter what I call doubt mode, which can last for quite a long while, 2 whole years at least for me, I think. You start questioning everything: your direction, your strategy, your energy, your worth, and that doubt, it spreads. It affects how confidently you speak about your work, project, your family planning, how you present your ideas, how you show up in conversations. And people can feel that energy, even if you never say the words out loud. I remember going to family dinners or, gatherings with friends during that time. And when people asked what I was up to, I'd shrink. I'd downplay it. I'd say something vague like, oh, just working on a little project, which is funny because in my head, it definitely wasn't a little project. Inside of my head, it was this huge ecosystem of ideas and possibilities. But when people looked at me across the dinner table, it suddenly felt safer to sound small because I didn't want to hear the questions, the skepticism, the well meaning but soul crushing advice to be realistic. At that time, I felt incredibly lonely. And I also felt sad because there was someone standing next to me who had absolutely no belief in what I was building. Someone I loved, someone whose opinion mattered to me. And if you've ever experienced that, you know how heavy that can feel. It's not just disappointing, it's isolating because suddenly you realize the people closest to you, they can't see what you see. They can't feel what you feel. And no matter how hard you try to explain it, the gap remains. But there was one thing I did know. I had to keep going because the only way to find the right people was to keep building the thing that would eventually attract them. And same counts for you, okay? And there's actually psychology behind all of this. When someone introduces a new idea or system, the first reaction from most people, it's not excitement, it's skepticism. Researchers who study innovation call this a social threat response. When people encounter something new, their brain immediately evaluates. Does this challenge the way that things are done? Does it threaten stability? Does it make me feel uncomfortable? And if the answer is yes, people often react with dismissal. Not because they're bad people, but because humans are wired for safety. Our brains are literally designed to protect us from risk, and anything unfamiliar registers as risk. Research on innovation adoption shows that only about 2.5% of people are natural innovators, and around 13.5 are early adopters. That means roughly 16%, only 16% of people will get excited about something new. The other 84%, they need proof first. They need to see it work. They need social validation. They need time, which means that when you're early, most people simply cannot see what you see yet. And that's the part that nobody tells you. Vision doesn't feel powerful in the beginning. It feels confusing. It feels fragile. And sometimes it feels incredibly lonely. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're seeing something that hasn't fully materialized yet. And being early almost always feels lonely. It's not just you. In fact, several founder surveys suggest that around 70% of founders report experiencing loneliness during their entrepreneurial journey, and nearly half say it directly affects their mental well being. Big ass numbers. So don't forget to check in with your therapist every once in a while. I do so too. So if you recognize that feeling, you're not broken. You're experiencing something that many builders go through. Another interesting thing that happens when you think ahead is that people start calling vision arrogance. You say something like, I think communities will really become important in the future. And someone responds with, oh, so you think you know better than anyone else, basically. Or the famous one, just be normal. But be normal has probably killed more dreams than failure ever has. Because when someone repeatedly hears that message, they start shrinking their ideas. They start playing small. They start second guessing the very thing that made them feel alive in the first place, even when the risk of trying might actually be quite small. For example, someone could work a job and build something meaningful on the side, a project, a community, a creative practice, a dream. And even if that dream starts small, it can slowly grow into something powerful for that person. I've seen it happen so many times. Someone joins a co working session, they mention an idea they've been sitting in for months, and you see it in their eyes. The moment that they realize, I'm actually building something that matters to me, that spark is one of the most beautiful things to witness. And honestly, that's part of why I do what I do. I genuinely believe people build better lives when they're surrounded by others who dare to think for themselves. Eventually, things started shifting for me. Slowly, people started joining the community. They started paying. Then something even more interesting happened. They started building things together. Suddenly, the idea that once sounded ridiculous, it started becoming a case, proof of work. But even then, the comments didn't stop. When I introduced a very low subscription price, people reacted strongly. Some said it was too low. Others said it was impossible to live from, and they had a point. It was low, so hard to live from. Some even said they would never pay for something like that. And suddenly, I felt observed, like people were watching the experiment, waiting for it to fail. Whenever a new member joined, I wanted to celebrate, but I often heard, don't celebrate too early. And I get it. People were trying to protect me from disappointment, right? But what they didn't realize was that every single new member mattered. Not because of the revenue, but because it was proof that I wasn't alone in seeing this, that other people felt it too. And those early members, they became the strongest foundation of the community. They stayed, they supported, they invited others, they became ambassadors. And many of them now are, they're not just members, they are friends, and I love them to bits. Here's the ironic part. Entrepreneurship can be incredibly lonely. Building anything meaningful can be lonely. But building a community has actually made me feel far less alone. And not just me, the people in it too. Recently, one of our members had a crisis moment, a business decision that felt overwhelming. Instead of facing that alone, we scheduled a call. 8 members joined. Ideas were shared, experiences were exchanged. Someone said, I went through exactly that last year. Here's what helped me. Someone else said, have you considered this angle? Things like that. And suddenly, something that could have felt isolating became collective. Because here's what I learned: humans are not meant to build everything alone. We're not meant to carry every burden in isolation. We're not meant to figure everything out by ourselves. We are wired hardwired for connection, for collaboration, for witnessing each other's struggles and celebrating each other's wins. And when you find the right people, the ones who see the world just a tiny bit like you do, everything changes. Not because the challenges disappear, but because you're not facing them alone anymore. If you're currently experiencing the loneliness of vision, here are three things that might help. First, separate vision from validation. Early vision rarely comes with applause. Instead of waiting for approval, focus on your proof of work. Build small experiments, collect signals, track what's working. Let evidence replace approval. When I first started, I didn't wait for permission. Well, at first I did a little bit, but after a while I stopped. I didn't wait for funding. I didn't wait for a perfect plan. I just started. And every small signal, every person who joined, every conversation that sparked something became my proof. Not proof that I was right, but proof that I wasn't alone. Second of all, track your mental state. And I cannot say this often enough. Entrepreneurship is psychologically very heavy. Building anything meaningful is a whole psychological thing. Your mindset, your energy, your self talk, it all matters. So, journal, reflect, talk with people you trust, check in with yourself regularly. Ask, am I building from fear or from vision? Am I proving something or creating something? Am I abandoning myself to keep going? These questions matter because sustainable building requires self awareness. And the third one, find the right people, not more people. Support will not come from everyone, okay? Sometimes five aligned people can change everything. Focus on those who understand your direction, who see what you want to see, who do not need any convincing. Those are your people. That's your tribe. And you don't need to fill a stadium of them. You just need enough to remind you that you are not crazy, that what you're seeing is real, that it matters. If this episode resonates with you, here's a small exercise you can try later today. Take a notebook, really write it down, and ask yourself one question. What vision am I currently shrinking because I'm afraid others won't understand it? Write down the honest answer. Maybe, replay the past 10 seconds back. Then ask yourself, what would the first tiny step look like if I trusted that vision just a little more? You don't need the whole plan, you just need the next step. The plan will show itself bit by bit. Trust the process. I know, cliche, but these words are apparently very needed for some people. Building something meaningful will always create friction. Because vision disrupts comfort, it challenges assumptions, and it introduces possibilities that others might not have, they might just not be ready to see yet. But if you feel the loneliness of vision, it doesn't mean you're arrogant. It doesn't mean that you are unrealistic. And it definitely doesn't mean that you're wrong. Sometimes it simply means that you're early, and being early is hard, man. It's uncomfortable. It requires faith when you don't have proof yet. It requires resilience when people don't understand. It requires you to believe in something that doesn't exist yet. But here's what I know. Every single thing, okay, that exists today, every innovation, every movement, every shift in culture, it started with someone who saw something that others didn't, someone who felt the loneliness of vision, someone who kept going anyway. So keep building, keep experimenting, keep trusting that little voice inside of you, and keep finding the people who see the world a little bit like you do. Because you don't need the whole world to believe in your vision, you just need enough people. to, start building it with you. And if you're listening to this right now, chances are pretty high that you're already one of those people. So, welcome to the family, and I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep sharing these episodes. We need it. You need it. Keep building the things that only you can see right now. The world usually catches up later.